Hi, everyone. Welcome to Dread Central's Dissecting Horror. I'm your host, Tyler Doupe. I am joined by Jeffrey Reddick, the writer-director of the film Don't Look Back, which is now available on VOD and digital download. Welcome, Jeffrey.
Hi, how are you?
Doing great. Thank you so much. Also joining me is Kourtney Bell, who plays Caitlyn in the film. Welcome, Kourtney.
Hi, thank you for having me.
We also have the film's composer, Chris Thomas. Welcome, Chris.
Hi, good to be here.
And last but not least, we have the film's producer and DP, Andy Steinman. Welcome, Andy.
Welcome. Hi, thank you.
Okay, let's take a look at the trailer for Don't Look Now.
Are you all right?
Just embarrassed.
Oh, don't be. Douglas.
Caitlyn.
Well, have a good run, Caitlyn. Help me.
Video of the assault and the fact that several bystanders stood by and just watched a man get beaten to death has sent shockwaves through the city.
Sir, wait, you can't go in there.
Are you arresting them?
They didn't break any laws.
They let my brother die.
Catch the guy who did this.
How can you live with yourselves?
I know you think you saw someone in Nathan's apartment.
I did. I don't think he killed himself. What if my actions are coming back to haunt me? I have felt this presence.
You mean like Douglas's presence?
Yeah.
I felt it too. If someone dies violently, a part of them can remain in our world like a trace or an echo.
Caitlyn.
Until they're avenged.
I have felt something since that day in the park.
Leave us out of it.
Help me.
What's wrong?
I saw Douglas.
Whoever killed him, they could have killed you too.
Someone grabbed me!
You have a habit of turning up when people die.
You think I did this?
One time I can write off as coincidence. Twice I get suspicious. 3 times? Well, no one's that unlucky.
Your life's in danger.
I have an opportunity to make this right.
When you do evil, evil comes back to you. I am so sorry.
All right, that was the trailer for Don't Look Back. I said Don't Look Now just to see if you were paying attention. No fault of my own, of course. With that in mind, let's go ahead and start with the festivities. So pleased to have all of you here today. I really enjoyed the film, and I'm very much looking forward to discussing it with each of you. On that note, Jeffrey, the film really speaks, in my interpretation, to the importance of standing up for what's right, as well as the consequences of sitting idly by. And those themes are perhaps more relatable now than ever. Where did the idea for the script come from?
The idea originally, the Kitty Genovese story, which is something that happened back in the 60s, I think, it was a story about a woman it's not a story, it happened. It was about a woman who was assaulted in her apartment complex. And at the time, the rumor was that all the people there heard her and a lot of people saw it and didn't help her. And that always stuck with me as kind of a kernel of an idea. And, eventually I just kind of tried to figure out the story I wanted to tell with it. And, I think the thing that really scares me the most, it's not like monsters or vampires or aliens. It's like how quickly real people can turn on each other and kind of how people have lost apathy or empathy for one another. So I kind of wanted to deal with that in a genre film.
Certainly, I think oftentimes the monsters that are human, are scarier than anything supernatural or that we could conjure in our minds, perhaps. And I think that worked incredibly well. Kourtney, I thought Caitlyn, excuse me, was a very relatable character. She's strong, she's resourceful, she has real conviction. You know, I really appreciated the way that you portrayed her. Was there anything in particular about her that you really related to?
I would say I don't know if I necessarily related to this as much as it's something that I want to relate to, that I'm working on in my own life, that I tried to really put in her. That I think when you're at that age where you're young, mid 20s, you're really learning how to step out on your own and figure things out and make your own decisions. And it can be really daunting because, you know, you just leave a place where you're guided by your parents or the decisions that you have to make within school. And so her circumstances are so unique of what she's going through. She really doesn't have, you know, obviously from the beginning of the film, she doesn't have the guidance at all anymore. And she's really on her own. And that she has so many people around her telling her that she's crazy, telling her that she's wrong. And so I wanted to try to figure out a way to make sure her art showed that the more people started to go against what she believed, the more she really stayed true to what was true to her. And I don't necessarily know if I'm great at doing that all the time, but I try my best to do it, especially the older that I get. And so I really related to that growth that she was experiencing.
Certainly, and this can go to either you, Kourtney, or you, Jeffrey, but I wondered, touching on what you just said, Kourtney, a little bit, was there kind of an intentional piece in there about the importance of believing women? You know, something that we as a society have been so hesitant to do for such a long time. I took a little bit of that away from it and was curious if that was intentional.
That was definitely intentional in the writing. And I think the great thing with Kourtney is we got a lot of time to, I mean, we talked a lot before we even met for pre-production about the character. And one of the choices we wanted to make was that she's so strong and rooted in her belief and her faith about what's happening that we wanted to keep that a through line for her. And I think that a lot of people have kind of noticed that, like, because a lot of times in genre films, you'll have, you know, everybody's telling the lead character that this is all in their head, and then they start believing it for a stretch until something really dramatic happens, like, and then they start going, okay, maybe this isn't all in my head. And so we talked about giving her that core strength while everybody around her was doubting her, which definitely speaks to, you know, how women are, you know, not listened to or not believed a lot, you know, when they report things. So that was definitely intentional in the writing. And then I think through my conversations with Kourtney, we made sure to kind of, you know, we would talk before scenes, you know, and just make, you know, and she would have ideas, and we just kind of really worked together on infusing this character with what was on the page and then what Kourtney wanted to bring to her as well.
That's great. And Jeffrey, that's something that I sincerely appreciate about you. I feel like on social media, you know, whenever we interact, you always are kind of advocating, you know, advocating for maybe the voiceless or for people who don't have their own platform. And, you know, I love that about you as a creator. I think that's so admirable to see someone using their platform to do good and to elevate others. I admire that.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's, you know, I've been a lifelong horror fan, and, you know, people have supported me creatively. So I always try to support other artists, but also being a, you know, Black gay filmmaker in this space, there aren't really any of us in this space. And, you know, just was kind of going back to trying to get people to have empathy for people that they don't understand or don't know, I think is important to me. So I try to, you know, just be honest about my life and how I live it and how I interact with people. And I hope that changes at least some people's minds and hearts about, you know, gay people, about, you know, people of color, of all colors, you know, about women, you know. So I you know, I'm not perfect by any means, but I do try to lead by example.
As a gay man, I appreciate that, and as a, you know, big supporter of women and, you know, advocate for, you know, really believing that, you know, the future is female in so many ways. I love that you do that, and you know, just want to say one more time, props to you, and thank you for using your voice for good. So switching gears a little bit, Chris, I'm curious in terms of the composition of the score, what kind of notes did Jeffrey give you before you set out to set the film to music?
Yeah, I think like most film scoring experiences, it's not the sort of thing where a composer should see picture and just dictate down what the music should sound like. You really need an assembly to watch first to really extract the ingredients the score is going to need. But we did know some things in advance, though. And a little bit of it surprised me. I was thinking, okay, it's going to be spooky, get ready for a lot of synths, a lot of builds and stingers. But then Jeffrey, remember Jeffrey Andrew, the producer, had set us up with it just very spontaneously on a chat. And I wasn't sure why you were even interested in working with a composer like me to begin with. And you said, well, it's because you write thematic orchestral music that, we're talking. And you believe very much that the film needed a theme, and it needed a theme we could connect to characters to grow a deeper relationship with the characters. And to my mind, that's exactly what a score should do. And so I think we just kind of nailed down what the nature of the music, or I guess what role the music was going to have in the film. But I tried to steer away from coming up with too many sounds beforehand, just so I could see picture and or also go to set and just get a feel for the composition of the film and know what well I was going to be drawing musical ideas from.
Sure. So I think you first said you were expecting a lot of harsh musical cues and, very very kind of intense. And I actually felt, correct me if I'm wrong, but I felt like the score was maybe a little bit understated. Was that something that you perhaps brought to the table, or, kind of a collaboration between you and Jeffrey? Either way, I should say, I think it's highly effective, not having it sort of jammed down your throat.
Yeah. Especially in films that have a lot of dialogue and a lot of character development, there's not always room to just sting things all the time. And often music can be very forced. And there's this thing going on with film over, it seems like it gets worse every year, is that movies just have more and more music and don't give the picture enough breathing time. And where music begins to start taking away, I feel, from other aspects of the production. And I like the fact that we let the movie breathe a bit. And it was a collaboration. There were times where I wasn't sure if I should hit something harder or not. And Jeffrey, always knows exactly what he wants and why. Some filmmakers, I'll throw a piece of music against picture and they kind of scratch their head for a few days and give me really scattered, imprecise notes. But Jeffrey's like, you know what? This just isn't scary enough here. I get why you're trying to be understated, but that needs to be a little frightening there. And so that was easy. He told me exactly where, so I go and fix it. And then sometimes I was trying to be scary, and he said, no, this is more about what's going on up here. Let's make this a psychological moment and draw me back from the brink too. So he really guided me through scene by scene.
Awesome. Well, hey, following up on that, Chris, one of our viewers, Jordan, has asked, what would you say is your most effective track in the film?
Most effective track? Oh, that's a specific question. Effective? I don't know. I remember my favorite. I think just because just the way the scene was shot just set it up where I really didn't need to do much. And the way the music integrated, I was very happy with. So Kourtney, it was the spot where the fingers coming through your hair and over your face. I just loved everything about that moment. And the minute I saw it, I knew exactly how I wanted to score it. And I knew I wasn't going to have to work too hard because so Andy, to your credit, it was shot beautifully. The scene just played and all I had to do was just be present. And whenever it's that easy, I think it's good.
Speaking of being shot beautifully, Andy, I thought that the film had a wonderfully dark, slightly muted appearance to it, maybe a little bit understated, kind of like the score. And I think that lends sort of an ominous quality. Can you speak a bit to how you went about creating that visual aesthetic?
I mean, I think usually it starts it starts in pre-production, starts talking to, the director, starts talking to Jeffrey, all the creatives involved, which I'd like to incorporate in and just kind of get a sense of where the character wants to go. The same kind of similar conversations, Jeffrey was having with Coco. We were talking about where we wanted to go with it, how far, because there's just so many choices to make. And I think once we kind of got a sense, understanding between ourselves, between me and Jeffrey, what the character would do, then that dictates, in essence, how the camera is going to move, which dictates how the lighting is going to be, besides the natural logistics of just shooting in general. And so then it could go so many different routes and so many different ways, and we discussed watching so many different movies. So we just used, I usually always want to say I use the script as my guide. Yes, but usually I use the characters, because the scripts can kind of change to some degree, but characters tend to stay the same as when it was written. So we kind of use how the character arced, and I use that as kind of a reference to how the camera moved and how the lighting would change. You see sometimes it's a little more muted, it's a little softer, the color palette can be a little muted down, and then as the character changes or progresses, the colors get more vibrant. It might get even grainier, it might maybe as clean. So you play with certain things where you want to change with the character, so it's just not the same across the board. So it's about, which me and Jeffrey talked about, just making a decision and then kind of just going off of it. And so you just used the character the whole time, and it was easy to do, to be honest with you.
Sure. So Andy, you kind of wore two hats in this film. You were the DP and you were a producer. Which of those came about first?
In this film, I would say producer came out first, for sure. And then it had definitely different iterations. Was been on it for a while with some of the other producers as well. And then as we got to the point where we got closer to shooting, we were looking at with other DPs, and it just seemed like the best, because I had lived with it for so long. We all worked together, me and Jeffrey, for so long. We figured might as well just kind of fill in that gap. And since we knew it, and it would be a smooth transition to, I don't necessarily recommend it to everyone to both produce and shoot. I had done it in the past once before. It can be rewarding, but it's very difficult at the same time. But it seemed like it made sense in this situation. I think it worked out.
Very cool. I have a viewer question for Kourtney. Kourtney, what was the most challenging part of playing Caitlyn?
Most challenging part about playing Caitlyn, I know this sounds silly, but truly the most challenging part or scene for me was the scene in the park. I guess now that the film's out, I don't want to give much away, but at the same time it's out. But it's in the trailer. When the man is attacked, I just found it so difficult and daunting leading up to it, because I knew that it wasn't going to be happening in front of my face. And I was so used to working in a theater space where, yes, it is all imagination, but you're either referencing something that you'll never actually see, or it's happening in front of you. So having Jeffrey call out reactions to me, like there's a big hit here, he's knocked to the ground here, he's reaching out and calling your name here. It's like, oh, this is just not something that I'm really used to. I'm not interacting with another human being. I'm completely reacting off of my imagination. And I was like, this is the most important moment in this film. If I don't sell this with my facial reactions, that could be a really big problem. And then I watched it and like, oh, it's not just me, it's 6 other people who are reacting, and then the audience is seeing the shots of those other people. So I've been dreading watching this one scene for a year and a half, and then I see it and I'm like, there are 3 shots of my face, it's fine. But hands down, I would say that was the scariest part, because I thought about it every day until we did it.
I don't think that was a silly answer at all. I think you did great. And, I told you this offline, but I really think you did a tremendous job of carrying the film. And it's, I can't think of the word I want to say, but it's sort of informative to know that you've done theater before, because you have such a knack for acting. And I was like, wait, this is your first, starring role in a feature film. Like, how are you doing this well? But, you really killed it. And, so I just want to, drive that point home. I have another viewer question. This one's for Jeffrey. Jeffrey, this anonymous reader says they haven't seen the film, but from the trailer, it almost seems like Don't Look Back takes place in the same universe as Final Destination. a world where you can't escape fate and every action has consequences, intentional or no?
I think there's an intent. I mean, I have a lot of things that I kind of realize are in my movies. Like a lot of my stories have people either doing something or seeing something, and the effects of that incident come back to haunt them, whether it's Tamra, and or other films. So you can't escape it. But this is definitely not like a Final Destination horror film. It's more of a what's doing it as opposed to who's doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not sure if there's a supernatural force that's coming after them, if it's a real killer because the witnesses get outed to the public, if it's a real killer coming after them, or if it's in Caitlyn's head. So, we kind of weave this kind of fine line throughout the film where you're not sure. There is karmic something happening, because they didn't help this person, but there's a lot of kind of twists and turns in the story. So I think that there will obviously inevitably be comparisons to Final Destination, but I think this is a completely different beast than Final Destination. Because one of the things is, since we don't know what's doing it, we couldn't show the kills. Like we couldn't have any like fun slasher murders or fun like supernatural people getting torn apart. Not that that's fun in real life, but for movies it's fun, and we couldn't do any of that because we have, it's more of a mystery. So but thematically I think that those things have always mattered to me. It's like bigger life questions, like if I don't help this person, is because I do believe in karma. Like I don't necessarily believe in it in a traditional way. I just, because I've seen a lot of bad people go really far in life, but but I do think if you put good in the world, like good things come back to you, and if you're in a good space for yourself, you attract good things to yourself. So I don't know what law of attraction, karma, spirituality, I think those kind of infuse all of the things I write, except for zombie movies. You don't get much of that in a zombie film.
Certainly. Piggybacking off of that last question a little bit, Jeffrey, something that I've noticed in your filmic output is that you seem to be very fond of numbers. In Final Destination, of course, the number 180 is kind of an Easter egg throughout the entire franchise. Also, you're working on a new film. Just lost my place in my notes, but something about the unlucky number 3, if I'm not mistaken. And then the number 27 played a huge role in Don't Look Back. Is that a coincidence, or is there something behind that?
I think there's a coincidence, and those are the films that get made. I've definitely written a lot of films that don't have numbers in them. Yeah, I have a lot of scripts that don't have numbers in them, but it is interesting that, I'm working on a Bloody Mary script where, you say her name 3 times in the mirror. And, I think numbers are inherently something that can kind of come up in horror films. There are unlucky numbers, and a lot of times you're looking for symmetry in a story, like why something is happening to this group of people. And I think numbers are kind of a thing that you kind of end up with. But yeah, it's a lot of these themes I don't realize until people point them out years later. I'm like, this isn't all your films. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Well, that's it.
I'm just ripping myself off all the time. That's what I'm doing, not even realizing. I'm just like ripping myself off over and over again.
No, not even close. I think that the inclusion of numbers in your films just adds a little bit of extra magic, and I think it's worked really well for you. So I wouldn't say you're ripping anyone off. I think you're doing great. I have a viewer question for Andy. Andy, what did you do to prep for the film?
Mainly just looked at a lot of movies. Me and Jeffrey, we kind of had the choice to, in essence, share a suite. We had different rooms, and when we actually started prepping, we just came into our main room, and we had a TV there, actually a golf net, and we just hung out and just watched a bunch of movies as much as we could, and we just talked about what we liked, what we didn't like about all the movies. The standard list that I'm sure everyone goes through, but it's always good to have a director and a DP, and then a producer director to talk about everything that we liked about all these different movies, the look, the camera, everything. So a lot of prep was just those kind of conversations and just getting a sense of what I liked, what Jeffrey liked, what we thought was good for the story, and then what we could actually apply to the other creatives and to everyone else in productions to make it actually real. So that was most of it. I would say just watch, scouting and all those things are great, but really it's just sitting down and talking to people about what you like and going back to the script and to the characters about what you think would be best for it.
Sure. I want to circle back to Chris because I have not spoken to you in a bit, and I don't want you to think I've forgotten about you. Chris, I don't have a musical bone in my body. I quit band in junior high because I could barely play my trumpet. With that said, I have a lot of respect for someone that can orchestrate the music for an entire film. Can you tell us a little bit about the difference between scoring a feature and scoring a short, which historically you've done a lot of short films, and then lately you've been more feature heavy. And I promise I'm getting somewhere. On that note, do you find that it's more difficult to score a short because you have to make more of an impression in a really short period of time, whereas you're with people for 90 plus minutes in a feature?
Oh yeah, no, you're spot on about that. I think scoring shorts is a lot more drudgery than a feature. While you're outputting so much more music in a feature, it's not just that you have enough time to score a feature, but you get to go on a slightly more meaningful journey. You get to come up with a piece of material and really work with it, really grow with different characters or mislead with different characters, and you get time to really do something. And sometimes I go through a little withdrawal after a feature. I start to miss the tunes, and I had all these other ideas I could have developed with them, but there just wasn't more movie. And I just begin to miss it for a while, and I have to sort of come down from that place. But scoring a short, I probably do more revisions on those than anything else. Like, it takes much more time to pin down a sound, and then it's just over before you really develop it. So, yeah.
Certainly. Kourtney, I touched on this a little bit before. This was, of course, your first starring role in a feature. And, as I mentioned, you did tremendous. You carried the film with confidence. Was there anything that surprised you or didn't go as expected, though? I mean, did you have a preconceived idea about how being the lead in a film would play out? And was it anything like that?
Not particularly. I mean, I just knew that I hadn't ever done it before, and I was hyper aware the entire time of how lucky I was that Jeffrey took a risk on me. I mean, 10 years from now, if I'm lucky enough to be in that position to pick somebody new like that, I don't know if I would do that, especially because I know how I felt the entire time. So I just try my best to watch and learn as much as possible. And everybody was so helpful the entire time. I definitely found myself spending more time with the crew, just because they're there every day and the cast is in and out. So I learned so much more about filmmaking than I would have ever expected. The order of shots, like whose pickups go where, how much time it takes to set up lighting, or what a rehearsal is like. I remember there was one day where Cedric, our AD, was laughing at me because I did a rehearsal full blown, like full out crying all into it. And then he pulled me aside after and he was like, "Kourtney, we haven't filmed that yet. And now you just did your best take and we didn't get this on camera." And I was like, "Oh, okay, good to know. I can, like, you have to be smart about what's going on because it's a visual medium." And I would have never known any of those things. So it's just so funny looking back and thinking how much I learned so immediately all at once, because I was doing it back to back to back for 28 days, I think.
I mean, you were in basically scheduling, you were in almost every single scene. You worked basically every day. We couldn't even find a day off for you, really, because you were always in it no matter what. So you were there, learning and doing whatever anyway.
Exactly.
You were always there, yeah.
I had one day off just because of that there was a thunderstorm that happened. And then I just wanted to see what they were doing that day. So I ended up going. And also, when Andy was talking about the room that they had with the golf in it, we ended up watching Game of Thrones. I think maybe the last 2 or 3 weekends after we do our night shoots. It'd be like 6 in the morning. We could go to bed, or we could go watch Game of Thrones. And we watched Game of Thrones. So we all got close. It was great.
Well, in terms of Jeffrey taking a risk, I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but I truly think it paid off. And I would be shocked if you weren't in 10 years in a position to give someone else a chance. And I think I'd also be shocked if you didn't. You just, from the, brief interactions that we've had prior to and during this call, you seem very down to earth. And, I really think the future's bright for you.
Thank you.
Of course. Bouncing back to a viewer question, actually I have a couple for Jeffrey. One of our readers/viewers wants to know, did you ever get to meet Wes Craven while he was alive? And if so, did he give you any advice?
Yeah, and I'm going to try to switch turn this camera off for some reason. It's really orange and it's bugging the crap out of me. I think it should just go with to my computer. Hang on. Okay, that's not as orange. Okay, sorry, it was really bothering me. You know what, I did eventually get to meet Wes Craven. I beat myself up because he's, like, as far as filmmakers go, he's my, idol, because I just love Nightmare on Elm Street so much. And I was in a documentary for New Line Cinema, the house that Freddie built, and they were interviewing Wes Craven after me, but I was so nervous. And I'm a grown-ass man at this point. This wasn't like teenage Jeffrey. This was like grown-ass man Jeffrey. I think it might have even been after. No, let's just say it was before Final Destination, so I don't sound as sad. But I was so freaked out to meet him that I couldn't stay to meet him. So I got to meet him at the premiere of Last House on the Left, the remake of that. And we sat down and we talked for 40 minutes. He was the nicest, most gracious man. The only thing he told me was he just said, never give up. That's all he said. That's all. The other stuff was just me talking to him and just talking about a little bit about Nightmare on Elm Street, some of his other films, and him asking about me, and so we just had a very normal, natural conversation. But he was such a smart man, and everybody that I know adored him so much. So he was a master of horror. So I definitely am never giving up, and I don't know what on, but just never giving up on anything.
I think that was great advice, number one. And number two, I feel like it's kind of come full circle, because I was so stoked about this panel with all of you guys today. I mean, I love the Final Destination series. And not only that, to say nothing of the fact that Stephen King just called out Final Destination as one of his favorite horror films of all time, in his top 24, 25 films, I think. So yeah. I mean, that's a pretty major career milestone. So just a giant congrats to you on that. That's really got to feel good.
It does. And obviously it takes a village to make a movie. So there were so many great people involved in that franchise too. But to have somebody, I mean, Stephen King was my book idol growing up. Stephen King, then Clive Barker came along. So then it was both of them. But I've always adored Stephen King. So to have him say that. I gotta meet that guy someday.
Yeah, I mean, I hope he's following you on Twitter. He certainly should be.
Well, he's not now, but maybe I'll hit him up afterwards and guilt trip him into.
Certainly, I don't think it would even be a guilt trip. I like to follow my favorite creators. I'm sure he does too. Probably just an oversight. So I have a viewer question from Paul. Paul wants to know, Jeffrey, do you have a favorite death scene in the Final Destination franchise?
Yes. And it's from the fifth film, actually. It's the gymnastics scene from the fifth film. And the reason I say that's my favorite, it's because I was involved in the first two. I love the opening scene of the second movie. I think that's one of the freeway pileup is, one of the most awesome opening scenes of any horror film. But the gymnastics scene was the first time that I went to a studio screening of the film and was so tense and then the way it ended, I yelled out really loud. So I think the gymnastics scene is my favorite of the franchise, but the bus scene in the first one is still gets everybody. But that gymnastics scene, I think, was just brilliantly scary.
Absolutely. Paul also asks, Andy, were there any particular obstacles you had to overcome with this film, cinematography wise?
I don't think the panel is long enough to go over all of the obstacles, as most movies are. you always want more time, to be. But in retrospect, looking back, I think it worked out great. There was little obstacles that came around with every scene. Even running out of lighter fluid for candles, and just the typical things that happen in all films. But all in all, it worked out the way it was supposed to work out, and it worked out pretty well. But yeah, there's always small obstacles. It's just it's not that I'm that old. I've just been through enough obstacles that they don't phase as much. So you just kind of breathe your way through it and just get the scene the best way you can. So that was kind of the mantra throughout, was just to stay kind of calm and go and get through it. So none of them really stuck out as massive obstacles. The hardest one I would say for us was choosing the actual location for the finale was probably the greatest obstacle in retrospect. And once we finally made that choice, then we just ran with it. So I'd say once we did that, then it's, locations are always tough, but then it actually worked out. It worked out really well.
Definitely. Well, props to you. I don't think anyone would know that you had any particular challenges. I think the end result is pretty exceptional. So, great work on not letting them see you sweat.
Thank you.
So let's check in here and see if I have any more viewer questions. Jeffrey, there are so many twists and layers to the script. Really impressive work, if I may say so again. Did you have the final reveal conceived all along? The final, without giving anything away, reveal in the last few minutes. Was that something that you had in your head all along, or is that something you kind of workshopped along the way and said, hey, I think this would work really well?
No, I had it in my head all along, because I think this movie is, again, it's about empathy, but it's also about making snap judgments and how we perceive things. And so, yeah, I'm going to say this without, hopefully, yeah, I'll say it without giving it away. But, the whole idea that even though things aren't always what they seem, and like, if you know certain things, does that, because a lot of times we make judgments about people just based on surface knowledge or a quick video online, and we don't know anything about the backstory. We don't know anything about what's going on underneath all that. So the idea was to question hey, if you step back for a moment, because we're in this very kind of cancel culture world where we see a snippet of something on YouTube and then all of a sudden we want to fire people and kill them, and then you read a week later, it's oh, there was more to the story. So I just wanted to kind of ask that question, kind of leave that question hanging, if there's more to the story, then you have to kind of go back and reassess what your assumptions and what your assumptions were.
Certainly. I think the third act really made the film for me. I think that everything was kind of building to that, and it was like a crescendo. It just it really all came together, and I think it came out even better than I was kind of anticipating. By the time I got to the end, I was just like, this is really thoughtfully put together, well written. Just really, really great work.
Oh, thank you. I mean, again, I have worked on it a lot, but I've also had some great people, helping me develop it over the years. So, yeah, it's been a process, but it definitely was very well thought out, because, I'd worked with some producers before. I worked with Andrew Vandenhouten, and then, I've worked with on this film, and then Andy Steinman. And we, even as producers, we went through the script, and just made sure things kind of made sense and landed. And I don't think, I shouldn't say that, because I don't think there are any plot holes, because we worked really hard for there not to be. So I think we tried to tie everything up in a way at the end that makes sense.
Certainly. So I've got another viewer question from Brian. Jeffrey, any chance you might use any of the Final Destination novels as source material for future movies?
Unfortunately, the studio owns all the rights to the film, so they're very, they haven't made very many sequels. I know they're working on another one, which is awesome, but we kind of got stuck with COVID, so that hasn't moved forward. So I'm not sure if they'll ever use any of the books as a jumping off point. I think they always seem to be going out and trying to, and Craig Perry's the producer on that franchise, and he's very much kind of the godfather of the series. He's kind of make sure it stays on track and make sure that the quality is very good. So yeah, I don't think that they'll probably look at the books for any inspiration, even though some of the books have been very brilliant. You know, there have been some great books written on it.
Sure, certainly. Looping back to Kourtney, I'm curious, with this being your first big feature, what was the audition process like for you? And also, how did the film get on your radar? I mean, did you show up to a casting call? Did someone reach out to you? What was the, how did that transpire?
Just the regular way. My agency sent me an audition, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the night before, and I had the audition the morning of.
Wow.
Yeah, so the turnaround was really quick. I had to do, I think I just had one scene and I had to do a monologue from it. And I remember assuming, at that point, it's like I could memorize this and then I could feel really, really stuck, making sure I know every single word, or I can just really focus on what is happening with the character, feel comfortable and confident with the fact that the paper is going to be in front of me. It's, not the only person who ever does it. And then I went into the casting office and I did it, and I didn't have a callback. I didn't have a producer session or director session. I just got a call the next morning that I had the part. And I was like, are you sure that there's like no other steps that are supposed to be happening here? But that was it. It was very fast.
So Jeffrey, it sounds like you and your team must have really immediately just known that she was the one. What was it about her or her audition process that really made her stand out, to the point where you just offered her the part off of that one reading?
Well, it was funny because I Googled her when I got the list of people who were coming in. I Googled everybody that was coming in, and Kourtney had a website up that had a bunch of clips from different shorts and things that she'd been in. And so I saw her pretty much an aspect of Caitlyn in every single short, and they were all different from each other. So it wasn't like Kourtney Bell being Kourtney Bell, she was a different character in all these shorts. So I had actually pretty much made up my mind before the audition.
Oh, wow.
So, you never tell them that because you got to make them sweat a little bit. But yeah, but I'd made up my mind, but you still have the producers have to kind of sign off on it too. But I have to say that, one thing to Andy and Andrew, which was wonderful, is, they did give me, creative freedom, and they gave my voice a lot of weight. So I don't think there were only a couple times maybe where things were kind of overridden, but it wasn't in a douchey kind of way. It was just like things that I maybe wanted this or that, like small things. Like they let me kind of make the big decisions because this is it, and that's why I'm so grateful to have worked with this team on this, because it was they took a chance on me, and so I'm grateful for the opportunity. But having staying in a suite with Andy, my DP and producer, I learned so fucking much from him. And then I also knew that I said fuck, yeah, it was the first time. Usually if you get me on camera or talking to kids, they fly out. But but I learned so much from him and the other crew members, but I also knew he had my back. But he wanted me to learn too. So it was, it wasn't like he held my hand like or in a baby kind of way. It was more like, let's make sure that you learn as much as you can from this. So I feel like I've grown like exponentially from this experience, and also it's changed the way that I think about writing. So it was just again, it was a tough experience because you think stuff. You think, oh, I've been on sets, I've done a short, I know everything. Here's some storyboards, 50 pages of storyboards for a half a scene. But and you think everything, but then you don't know till you get on set what you don't know. And I learned so much, and a lot of it was because I had such a great team around me, and that everybody was there for the same purpose. Like, let's make this the best film possible.
Certainly. I have a question for everyone but Jeffrey, and and not for Jeffrey, for the very specific reason that we all know you're a horror fan. But for the rest of the panel, one of our viewers asked, are any of you horror fans? And if so, what are some of your nearest and dearest and most favorite horror movies? Anyone that would like to kick it off, please be our guest.
All right, fine, I'll go. So yes, I've always been a horror fan from across the board. I mean, I've always been a movie fan, and I think, you know, in general, that genre has always intrigued me. As I've been such a horror fan for so long, the favorite movies have fluctuated for so long. You know, as a kid, yeah, absolutely, Nightmare on Elm Street put a huge effects. I mean, we talked about Clive Barker, we talked about Wes Craven. You know, they were in Stephen King. They've all been people that influenced me for sure. But even other movies that people haven't seen, you know, as I was growing up, Serpent and the Rainbow messed with me, Cats People messed with me, like just movies that basically made me go to sleep and give me nightmares. I was like, to have the power to mess with me mentally from the moment I stopped watching the movie, I just thought had so much power and intrigue. And I don't realize it was the filmmaking as combined with the storytelling. And it kind of made me start wanting to get into movies in general, just because the power that the genre had. So I've been a horror fan for as long as I've been a movie fan. The list is long of all the type of filmmakers and all the movies.
That's great, and that really speaks. I think that really speaks to the power of the genre, that it had such an impact on you. How about you, Chris?
Yeah, I've been a horror fan my whole life. For me, it's more like I came into it, you know, actually, well, looking back on it now, it's very warm and fuzzy and nostalgic for me because my mom got me watching horror movies when I was little, and I mean little. And then when I'd stay with my grandma, she would watch Silence of the Lambs and Carrie and movies like that with me. So horror, the women in my family really took to it and brought me into it. And when I was, you know, 6, 7 years old, when we'd be watching some scary movie, like we'd be watching Salem's Lot or a film like that, and you know, I'd see my mom and my grandma laughing and just loving it. We were all terrified, but I could see this connection to enjoyment with the movies. And so for me, it just has a lot of warm and fuzzies. Favorites, oh my God. You know, Andy, you answered a lot of that pretty similarly. It's a genre that speaks to me for different reasons at different times. And I've noticed the thread for myself is more like, I love horror films that also cross with a drama or a supernatural, where it's not just one thing, but it's just great cinema all around. And you know, when I was new to the genre, I think movies like, you know, Shining, or you know, over the years, you know, Exorcism of Emily Rose, even a movie like Silence of the Lambs, which is very much, you know, a drama, but it's also kind of scary. I mean, it's just, there's so many great films that cross so many intersections, and they're just wonderful cinema. And it happened to be that a lot of my favorite horror films growing up were scored by the same composer. And when I was younger, I got to, he was my mentor when I first moved to Los Angeles. And so I think I was just destined for the genre.
So, Kourtney, how about you? Was this kind of your first introduction to the horror genre? Are you a dyed-in-the-wool fan? What's your relationship?
I mean, I can't emphasize this enough. I don't like them adamantly. And I guess it's really ironic that my big opportunity with acting, of course, came with horror films. My friends would drag me to go see them, you know, when I was finally 13, you can go see a PG-13 movie. And I was the person who, in the movie theater, I would sit there and I'd have to express out loud, this doesn't make sense. This is just makeup. This is not actually happening. That person is just an actor and they're alive. Like, it was the only way I could get myself through it, just to ruin the movie for everybody else. I think now that I'm a little older, psychological thrillers have become more popular, and I have found that I actually really like those, and I can sit through them because I like the message of them. But even still, I'm like, why? Why do you want to scare yourself? Like, why do you want to do that to yourself today?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that was it. I can't emphasize it enough. The horror films are horrifying.
Do you feel, though, like seeing the process kind of deconstructed and built from the ground up took some of the terror out of that? Because I mean, now you can really look at it clinically, kind of like you were doing when you were scared as a teenager.
I mean, yes and no. I feel like that was what I liked about it in the first place. Like, it was kind of fun for me to pick it apart just because I didn't like the idea of being scared. And so now I think I just have more appreciation for how crazy it is that somebody is actually able to evoke such a strong feeling in you when you know that right before they, you know, set action, everybody's laughing. Like people are running around trying to make sure that this thing fits here. And like, there's no scary music happening when you're walking through that, you know, house in the middle of the night and somebody's going to jump out and scare you. And like, that's your friend who's going to jump out and scare you. And also there are 30 other people in the room who are watching everybody do that. And I also wonder, like, why, Jeffrey, do you just wake up one day in the morning and you're like, I have this idea how to brutally kill this person. I'm going to write this down, and that's my day to day. That's all I'm writing. People dying today. But it is interesting because it's just imagination. I mean, out of any film, that's probably the one that's hopefully most unlikely for people to experience. It's like furthest from what's real life for everyone. I don't think people experience horrifying things on a day to day.
Certainly. And Jeffrey, so as not to leave you out, I would also, of course, love to know from you what are some of your favorite horror films, but the first part of the question obviously did not apply.
I was like, what first part? You know, I have this, you know, Nightmare on Elm Street's always going to be the top of my list because of when I saw it and how much of an impact it had on my life and career. But there's too many to list. I mean, some of the touchstone ones for me that really made me realize, oh, this is something really special. Where like Candyman, I love that film. You know, Scream, I thought was another film that really reinvented and reinvigorated the genre for me. I love the classics like The Omen, The Exorcist, Halloween, Friday. You know, pretty much any top 20 horror list of films you're going to see. Like, I like them, but I think the ones that really stand out are things like, you know, Candyman, Scream, you know, Get Out was another one that really seismically shifted things. So, you know,
Well, that's great. And speaking of, you know, top 20 all-time horror film lists, I just have to mention one more time that you're now getting mentioned on them. So that's just got to be surreal to be in such great company with creators that you grew up admiring.
Yeah, no, it is. And there's a lot of people on there that I know that are friends of mine. So it's, you know, as I always say this, as a horror fan, you know, I always think about that 14-year-old hillbilly in Kentucky who was watching like A Nightmare on Elm Street with his friends and reading Fangoria and had all these, you know, making up bloody effects at home to freak our parents out. Like, you know, I'm very happy that something I created has had such an impact on the culture. Like, you know, you hope for success, but you don't expect it to be like people 20 years later, you know, saying, oh, that's a Final Destination moment, you know. Well, it's more than 20 years. I keep trying to de-age myself, but damn it, that movie just keeps getting older. But it's very exciting. And, you know, and it's obviously, you know, I just hope to create more films in the genre that speak to people. So
certainly. We have time for one more viewer question, and this is a quick one. Jeffrey, who signed the Jason mask on the wall behind you?
Victor Miller.
Very nice.
Yes.
Very nice. Well, with that, I will go ahead and give each of you guys an opportunity, if you'd like, to tell us what's coming up next for you. Can we start with Chris?
Sure. Gosh, I'd love to talk about the next movie I have coming out, but they haven't made the announcement yet. So how about I just plug the new Halloween album that I have? I do a lot of music for theme parks every year. And my little side venture, Music for Haunts, has a new album.
Congratulations. That's really exciting. How about you, Andy?
Same. Nothing to be announced, but definitely have several projects that I'm interested in doing that are probably due 2021, even through COVID. So a lot will be happening pretty early on in 2021.
Very cool. Hey, Kourtney, how about you?
Pretty much the same answer. I think I already got pretty much on pause, and now we're all picking back up. But I'm on season 2 of All American, which is on the CW and Netflix. So you can find that at any time.
Congratulations, that's amazing. And Jeffrey, how about you? Can you tell us anything about the upcoming Bloody Mary script that you're working on?
Still, we're working on getting that financed. The thing I can tell you about for sure, because in this business, until the money's in the bank, you know, you don't count on anything. You know, I'm working on this Netflix animated series, Samurai Rabbit, which is based on the Usagi Yojimbo Japanese comic book. It's a spinoff, which is, you know, really exciting. So I'm writing on that right now. That'll be coming out. Halloween 2022. And then, I would just say, I'd love to just plug this movie more because it just came out. I know everybody's mind's on, the election, to be honest. Like, some people are, freaking out and stressing out, but I think it turned out really well, and I think people will enjoy it. So I hope people will check out Don't Look Back. And you can follow me on Twitter, Jeffrey A. Reddick, to get updates on my new stuff and follow all these wonderful people as well.
I would recommend both checking out the film and following Jeffrey as well as the rest of the cast and creative team. It's, it's got my seal of approval. Great film, great work from everyone. And I will just part with you by saying, or before I part with you, allow me to say that tomorrow, 6 p.m. Pacific, for Dread Central, I'm hosting, keep tripping over my tongue, I'm hosting a Scream Queens panel dissecting the term, looking at feminism and horror, gender politics, and we've got an epic list of attendees, Barbara Crampton, Dee Wallace, Debbie Rochon, Lori Lathine, Jordan Ladd, Serena Vincent. I can't list them all off the top of my head, but there are so many exciting, incredibly talented, creative women. So I hope that our viewers and anyone else that's interested will tune in tomorrow. And with that said, just allow me to say thank you, Christopher. Thank you, Kourtney. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Jeffrey. You guys have been such a pleasure to talk to. I once again just encourage everyone to check out the film. I really think you're going to like it. And check out the cast and creative team on social media. Thanks so much for attending, guys.
Thank you so much, Tyler and Dread Central.
Thank you.
It was nice seeing you all too.